President's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has entered a plea deal with federal prosecutors in New York. Let's get straight to CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reid, who's outside the courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. Paula, what do we know?
That's right, Rena. Sources familiar tell me that Michael Cohen has entered a plea deal with the Justice Department to resolve an ongoing criminal investigation into his personal finances. Now, sources familiar with the case, they tell me that Cohen was expecting to be charged with certain offenses related to his personal finance, potentially campaign finance violations, and also related to some taxi medallions that he owned in New York. Now, this evidence of possible criminal activity was uncovered during Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign. But when Mueller looked at the evidence, he decided there wasn't enough of a connection to Russia, and he also assessed Cohen to not be a reliable witness, so he decided to pass this case off to the Justice Department in New York. Now, sources tell me that in order to avoid millions of dollars in legal bills and also the emotional toll that this would take on his family, Cohen has decided to enter a plea deal to resolve this case. Now, many people are asking, well, does that mean that he has flipped on the president? Rena, sources are telling us no. At this point, there is no indication that he has agreed to testify or provide evidence against the president or anyone else. This is expected to be a straight plea deal where he goes in and he pleads guilty to a certain number of charges in order to resolve the investigation, but he'll be sentenced at a later date, and any subsequent information that he provides to Robert Mueller or the Justice Department or any other investigation in the land, that could potentially help him at that sentencing.
You know, Paula, we've talked about Manafort quite a bit, and so many people are saying that he could potentially be banking on some sort of a pardon. Do you think that might be the case also with Cohen?
Well, Cohen could potentially get a pardon. Now, what's tricky about Cohen, though, is he is facing a state-level investigation in addition to this federal investigation. If he was to receive clemency from the president, if the president pardoned him or commuted his sentence, that would only apply to the federal charges. He is still exposed at the state level. We also have to remember that the relationship between the president and Michael Cohen is not what it once was. I mean, Cohen has really publicly broken with the president over the past several weeks. He has come out and disagreed with the president not only on policy, but there have also been leaked recordings from Cohen that Cohen made in conversations with the president. It is hard to see sort of a Manafort pardon possibility and a possible Cohen pardon as being at the same likelihood. I think Manafort has a reasonable expectation. He has not cooperated with special counsel prosecutors. If he is convicted, there is a very strong likelihood the president could pardon him, seeing him as the target or the victim of a politically motivated prosecution. It does not appear that Cohen falls in the same category. I don't think that the president would be as open to the idea, but it is certainly on the table.
You know, Paula, you said that we don't know just at this point whether or not Cohen will testify. Any sort of sense as to whether he might? Do we know?
At this point, sources tell me that is not expected. This is expected to be a straight plea deal where he walks in, he agrees that he pleads guilty to any number of charges to resolve the case and to get out of all the other charges that could be filed against him. This is how most criminal cases resolve. Taxpayers don't want to put on an expensive trial for every single criminal investigation, so many of them resolve in this manner. In fact, in the course of the Mueller probe, we've only really seen one person, though, who just came in and pleaded guilty. So there are other instances where you generally have to cooperate in any other investigation. But right now, what we know is that he's expected to go in and plead guilty. At this point, sources tell me there is no agreement that he will cooperate against the president or anyone else in exchange for pleading guilty.
So if your sources are correct, which they always tend to be, I would say, Paula, you've got great sources. What do you think it means then for the president if the sense is that Cohen isn't flipping on him?
Well, the good news is that it appears for the president, it appears that the special counsel and other Justice Department officials have assessed Michael Cohen as not being a reliable witness. I have been told by sources familiar with the special counsel's thinking that when they assessed Michael Cohen, they thought that he was not actually a reliable source of information. He is not the kind of witness they want to put on the stand because he has told so many, according to these sources, lies. They believe that he is not necessarily trustworthy. They think if they put him on the stand, he would be easily impeached or undermined. He's problematic. So even if he had information to give them, they didn't believe that that was worth it for them to drop any additional charges in exchange for that information. So the good news for the president is that this person who may potentially know, where all the skeletons are in your closet or know some dirt on you, people don't want to talk to him. People don't want to use his information. But of course, the bad news for the president is that his longtime fixer and personal confidant is pleading guilty in a federal investigation. That's never a good sign. And of course, he's one of many people in the president's inner circle over the past few years, his personal business, his campaign, who have not only come under scrutiny from the Justice Department, but who have actually pleaded guilty.
Paula Reid joining us from outside the courthouse. Paula, if you can stick with us for a second, I also want to bring in for some more legal analysis Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson, who joins me now by phone. Jessica, I wanted to get your initial reaction to this notion that Cohen has officially struck a plea deal.
Well, I actually think it's a great insight for the public into the criminal justice system. As you were just talking about, most federal cases never go to trial, and in the vast majority of cases, there is a plea deal, and that's what we're seeing here. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything for the Mueller investigation. What it means is that the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York went to Michael Cohen and his lawyers, and I think that they said, we have evidence based on 3 buckets of crimes. Those buckets are tax evasion for apparently underreporting income that he got from his taxi cab business. The second bucket is banking fraud for apparently misrepresenting how much he was worth in order to obtain loans from banks. And then the third bucket is campaign finance, which is related to his payments to, for instance, Stormy Daniels in order to try and affect the election. And so we don't know exactly which one of those he will plead guilty to, but I think it's fascinating insight for the public into what happens in a federal criminal investigation.
Is he tainted by the fact that, we know that his credibility might not, he's flipped so many times on his story? Is that a problem when you're presenting his testimony, maybe, in support of exactly what you're looking into?
Well, I think that a lot of this will be based on, the discussion you just had was kind of shocking in the sense that it appears that federal investigators think that Michael Cohen lacks such credibility that they just simply couldn't put him on the stand, and they're not interested in what he has to say. So in terms of this case, in terms of how many times his story has changed, in terms of his lying, in terms of, I think, his credibility problems, my guess is that there's an enormous amount of documentary evidence. And so we're not basing this plea deal on what he says or what he's not going to say. We're basing it on bank statements, tax statements, offshore banking accounts, taped conversations that were had, for instance, between the parent company of the National Enquirer, documentary evidence related to the payment to Stormy Daniels. So I don't think we're really relying on his word, actually, all that much.
Jessica Levinson coming to us from Loyola Law School. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to go back now to our Paula Reid in Alexandria, Virginia, who has more information on Cohen. Paula.
That's right, Rena. Michael Cohen is expected to appear in federal court in Manhattan around 4 p.m. this afternoon to formalize this plea deal. During that proceeding, he will go before a judge. The charges against him that he has agreed to plead guilty to, those will be revealed. I have sources telling me that some of this will be related to campaign finance violations. As you and your expert there, you were just mentioning how there was some confusion over how exactly he was taking in money related to this campaign. He was taking money as a consultant and putting it to the same fund that he was also using to pay certain women to stay quiet about their alleged affairs with the president, including Stormy Daniels. And there are some campaign finance concerns around how he was managing his finances. As of now, we do not know specifically what he has agreed to plead guilty to, but I am told campaign finance violations are expected to be part of this plea deal, which will be unsealed around 4 o'clock in Manhattan.